Hello, and it's been a while, a few weeks. Hello, Sean. Hello, David. Hello, everyone who's online and watching. So, I've been away for a couple of weeks, and there's a fair few things we can talk about today, which includes an Asian version of a myth you're probably more familiar with from India. We have some talking about the Mythology database, of course. We've got a video I haven't released to the public yet, of the patrons and YouTube members have seen. And I want to talk about the Mabinogion. So yes, I hope you're all ready for a wonderful evening. Hello, Millie, young Helen. Hello. Hello, Kif. I hope you're all well. And I hope my absence wasn't really noticed. And you found things to do. So sorry, just I'm so unorganized and very jet lagged. So bear with me. So where do I start really? So you have a Lindsay. Hello, Lindsay. You have a bottle of Mythos. Other beers are available. Mabinogi. Yes. Well, let's start with the Mabinogion. So one of the patrons asked about Welsh folklore and the Mabinogion. So what I have done is got in touch with a friend of mine who is very well read on this. And it's someone some of you may know. Hello, Jessica. And it is a chap called John Mason. John's just finished his PhD at Brighton, so he's now Dr. John. Very popular name. And yes, so I've asked him if he'd come along and give a talk on that. And so if you're a YouTube member or a patron, you've got opportunities to ask questions in the comments where I've posted it coming along. If you do have questions and you're not a member of YouTube or patron, then ask them here and I'll try to make a note of them and ask John. Now, that may be a live stream, but it's probably going to be a pre-recorded session because of just timing, and John has a family, and doing a live stream on a Sunday night when he's got a family will probably be quite difficult because all these kids are trying to play World of Warcraft or something, and the bandwidth is limited. But yeah, so looking forward to that. So if you don't know what the Mabinogion is, it is a story that touches on some mythic, or I'd say even legendary characters, including King Arthur. And it's a fascinating story that's often told in 4 different parts. And yeah, this is why I've got John on, so he can actually explain it. But it is just a fascinating tale with all sorts of motifs and mythemes going on in it that you'd be familiar with if you like folktale and folklore. Some marvelous lines where people have to do quests that are almost never ending in the things that are needed to be achieved. Yeah, there's bits of money, and if you do want to study the Mabinogion, John recommended this book to me actually when some years ago, but I didn't realise how expensive it is now. But if you're serious about wanting to learn more about the Mabinogion and you can afford it, this is the book he recommends. But what we'll do is, I am trying to get John to actually perform the Mabinogion on stage live, although it'd be a very abridged version of it. But I know in the past he's done some shows online, and I think he probably did 4 nights where he did a sort of a couple of hours a night to split the book up into his 4 relative books, so to speak, even though I think there's probably actually 6 books in it, if I remember rightly. So yes, that's the plan. And yeah, that will hopefully happen in 2 or 3 weeks, but I'll just wait for John to get back to me because I've been away, so we have sort of missed each other in terms of communications. So yes, right now before I carry on, let's say hello to other people. Hello, Exit. Hello, Skip Ahoy. Hello, Mark. Val the guest. Very familiar faces. And Mr. Krenin. Hello. So, what else has been going on? So if you had the last live stream, I told you a folk tale called The She Bear and the Doe. And it's quite a brutally horrific folk tale where a dominant female character kills a less dominant female character, like they're both mothers. And so the children of the mother who is killed find out that that's happened and then kill the children of the dominant mother. It's quite horrific, as I say. Now, I've released that video to YouTube members and Patreon members. I do want to release it to the public if you're interested in it. However, I can't think of a thumbnail to give it, which YouTube wouldn't ban. But as soon as I get that figured out, I will share that with you as well, just so you know there is a video coming. So that's one of the other things going on. Now, the reason I'm saying this is, as part of that, I found the mythology database, or the folklore database, was broken. Because what I'd like to do is, as I go through the videos and show dispersals, I like to actually use the database to show those dispersals. And I realised I had a bug in the database that was referring to old location information, not new location information. So the mythology database has had a bit of an upgrade. So it now not only does it point to the right geographical data, what it has now within it is the ability to compare not just motifs, but the sub-motifs. And the way, let me log on and I'll explain it, because for some people, I think this might be a really useful tool. Let me just log on and share the screen. And I do... I'll share the screen. That's it. Right, bear with me. Share screen. Entire screen. That one. Okay. So, can I just make myself small in the corner? There you go. So, in the mythology database, what you can do is you can compare motifs. Okay. And what this means is that you can choose two motifs such as A1 and let's say A2. Click compare, and it will show you where in the world we have stories that are told with those motifs. And then it also shows with the red dots where both motifs are told if it's in the same location. Now, what happened is when I was researching this she bear and the doe, it turns out there are many motifs in it. Not just she bears, but there's rabbits and other animals, and as well as humans. And all of these has separate motifs. So I've got J53 up here. So if you go J53, what you'll see is that the children of a character associated with a hoofed animal, and you've got like deer and antelope come into conflict. But there's also an A1, B, C to represent different other characters. So what I've now done is I've introduced a selection box, which if you click it, it will select all the sub-motifs as well. And then if we do one, let's say as well, do A2 is quite big, A2, and with the motifs, if you then compare those, it will actually show that it's comparing all the sub-motifs. So that may be useful for some people who are doing research using the database. So I don't know if any of you have any questions about that, but let's say that was one of the things that was broken, and allowed me to discover I'd actually had a significant bug within the database. Hello, Brian. There's a few people just joined. Hello, River Forest. Hello, Stella. Hello, Dell. Bonsai. Hello. Teddy. Right. So Now, the other thing that happened whilst I was away is that uh, I think it was Toronto University. There was someone there doing a PhD on riches and how people became rich, but they wanted to understand motifs based on country rather than tradition, which I flagged as being unusual because cultures don't necessarily conform to national boundaries, that they were there before. But the student was quite insistent. So what I have done with regards to that, to let you know on the database, is now if we, let's say, search for a narrative, who knows, fire dragons, and hopefully that will come up with something. Please, it's going to come up with a lot because it's taking some time. What we can do is if you now go down and select, let's say, read an English version of a Hungarian myth, we can click, you'll see it. What the system now does is I've included country as well as a tradition or culture. Now, obviously, Hungarians come from Hungary, but if you're looking at First Nation tribes, you'll have the First Nation tribe and saves from North America. So I'm not too sure how useful that is going to be for people, but sometimes I guess some people don't necessarily understand where a tradition is from, and so that may make more sense for you. So I hope that sort of makes sense. Right, I see some questions, so let me answer these in case I'm whizzing through here too fast. Yes, please hit the like and subscribe button. I keep forgetting to ask people to do that. It really does help, especially at the moment. But yes, please do that. So, thank you for the reminder, Keith. So, right. I'm sure I saw someone ask a question. Right, you have the Mabinogion thing. When is the Mabinogion thing happening? No date agreed yet, but I expect it to be in the second half of May, and it will probably be pre-recorded. However, if I can make it a live stream, I will. And the reason I can't do it earlier in May is I have a friend of mine who's a researcher from Norway coming over with his children, and he's going to stay here. So there's just no time. I'll be focusing on him. Although I haven't asked him yet, I may see if he wants to do a live stream or a video to record for you guys. So he's done work with David Reich and the like on DNA and the Indo-Europeans, and he's just been working in Georgia, I believe, in the Caucasus, studying stuff there. So hopefully I'll have some news about that next week, because that's when he's here. So a question. Let's show it. It's a Mabinogion question. Right. Trogons in Lud and Liffey's HRB and HB Merlin come to us through bardic tradition and romances, but St. George through the Golden Legends and Mama's Plays. Any comments on that? So are you saying why do different stories seem to have different origins but are still considered to be, say, British, for sake of a better word to use to cover them all? And that really depends on the culture that brought them here. So Christians would have brought some stories. Traditional stories or pre-Christian stories may have been influenced by Christians and then developed. So we see, the various stories reflecting various moments in time of a culture or of a nation. And we'll talk about that more in a second, because I was away. I'll tell you where I went and I discovered something, and I want to talk about that. But so, just because, let's say, stories are considered English, let's say, in my respect, in my sort of where I live, if I look at the stories, they, how was I going to say, they could have been created at any point in the time of England and before. So, yeah, it's just the way it is, different things in society adjusting. Now, if you're trying to also maybe ask, why does the Mabinogion have two different sources of characters in one? But St. George isn't in the Mabinogion, so you're probably not asking that. So, so it's primarily to do with Christianity and things the church wanted and royalty wanted at the time. So St. George replaced a patron saint of England who was already there, because I believe the king wanted someone who was more heroic, I believe. So, yeah, these things just happen. It's just lucky we understand it, certainly in English history, that it did happen, so we can see why. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I've witted a bit there, but hopefully that sort of makes sense, Lindsay. So, congratulations on your channel. Thank you. So someone says it all comes from Irish mythology. The Mabinogion. So this is another thing we have to consider, that the Mabinogion was it in English folklore. It could also be considered Welsh folklore. Some people may even consider it Celtic folklore, but I really don't like that term because it's so broad and ambiguous. And if it is Celtic, then you sort of touch on the Irish. But it's certainly, I would say, it's more Brittonic than English. It's just probably a better word to use, a Brittonic. But again, John will probably be able to give us a better steer on what that is when he comes along. I know that people are now, saying that. Brian, thank you. So, any other questions? So, question from Vadagast: have you seen the original Wicker Man, and what did you think? I haven't seen the original Wicker Man, so I haven't really any thoughts on it other than I don't know. Is it worth seeing? I mean, it isn't worth seeing from a sort of a trying to understand pagan religion, but if you think it's an interesting film, I might try to give it a watch sometime. So I see a lot of people talking about Celts and Irish and what even is indigenous European. Ireland isn't European for a start, right? Hello, Robin. So the people of Ireland are very much influenced from Indo-European culture, and they are also very much were influenced from what we call the Anatolian farming culture. So I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I would presume there is very little, if any, remnants of hunter-gatherer Irish people in Ireland anymore. They were probably wiped out, if not by the farming community or the farming cultures, but by the Indo-European carrying cultures. Now, I'm not saying the Yamnaya went all the way to Ireland, but what we can see is the Yamnaya culture came into Europe, and the culture spread, even if their DNA didn't necessarily spread everywhere. It's a complicated picture, and we see that go into Ireland. So the question is, what makes someone Irish? Is it their culture or where they were born, especially if the nation of Ireland didn't exist at the time? And you can go down a whole rabbit hole, and some people are very nationalistic and some like the culture, but to me, we can see in stories like the Tane, which is an absolute cattle raiding myth with, in effect, motifs that are absolutely taken from the Indo-European creation myth within it. So we see definite Indo-European culture within Ireland. Celtic, I don't like using because it is quite generic. There is it really reflects I think they call it a second phase of the Iron Age, coming from Switzerland or that kind of location, Central Europe, that spread out with a particular art form. And most people consider that Celtic, but then you also have a Celtic language. So you have to be really very specific on what you mean when you say Celtic. Do you mean the language or this art form, which, or what, and some people will throw druids into that and all sorts. So it is complicated, and yes, using the word Celtic is can be ambiguous, and you really have to define it. So hello Zachary, hello Zep, and Arthurian legend is French. So the Arthur is first mentioned in Welsh poetry, what we consider Welsh poetry. He's also mentioned in English poetry, but what we find is that the French then like that story so much they enhance it and throw in a Merlin and Lancelot and the Holy Grail or the Grail initially, and then it changes into the Holy Grail. So the French really enhance that story, and that's the story many people know today on King Arthur. Hello Naga. There's lots of talking going on. Well, I'm really impressed. Right, so I then got to the end of the question. So we discussed the Mabinogion, had a little discussion on Ireland, talked about the updates in the countries within the Mythology database, so it's now working a lot better. I'm still working on improving the data quality. I stopped that whilst I was away, but I've just started that again, and I've just invested in a new computer out of my own pocket to do further work on analysing data. And that computer isn't working very well at the moment, but hopefully I can get it working in the next week or so, and then there'll be a paper out on the definition of mythemes and the consistency of the definition of mythemes, which I'll write, and hopefully I can approach the definitions of mythemes in the Mythology database again, so we've got a better layer of detail to go into when searching the narratives, which allows us to do better comparative mythology. So, saying that, what else has been going on? Well, as I say, I went away, and I actually went to Asia with my children. I took them to a few places, but one of the places we went was Bangkok. Now, what I didn't realise was Bangkok isn't the original capital of Thailand. That capital got destroyed by Burma in wars during the 17th century. And Bangkok was created as a new city, and in that a new palace was built for the king, King Rama, I believe his name was. And we went to this palace, and it was absolutely incredible. There was a golden temple, I think it was of the Jade Buddha, I think, in the centre of it, which was fascinating. Now, I've been to lots of temples in my life and religious places, from the Sistine Chapel and to cathedrals, but this was absolutely took my breath away. But the whole palace was fascinating, and what was fascinating about it particularly was that it's contained within a wall, and the walls had murals on them, and there are, I made a note of it somewhere, 178 panels. So let me, if I can put these panels up, let me show you. Can I? Yes. So panels like this, and I was looking at these panels, and I was like, they were definitely telling a story, but I couldn't quite work out what the story was. And it turns out that the story is of the Ramayana, which is often considered an Indian epic. So in India, you have two epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. And if you're not familiar with the Ramayana, the Indian version is basically a story where a king gets old and he has a number of sons, one of which is very divine and prince-like. He doesn't get to go on the throne. Instead, another one of his brothers does that due to a sort of a promise made, I think it is. There are various versions of the story, and this brother and one of his brothers and his wife get expelled from the region for 14 years, and eventually something happens where a demon basically kidnaps the wife of the prince, Rama, and Rama has to befriend a monkey god, I think it is, who then with him rescues the princess. And one of the major things in it is that Rama is a really good archer, and he has a magical bow, and he uses this to destroy this demon king with 10 heads. Brilliant story. I've probably got much of the detail wrong, but it's a substantial book. But yes, I was here at this palace, and this mule turns out to be a Thai version of the Ramayana. So I managed to also get hold of a book, because if this thing interests you, I got this at the site. It's about £5, although I haven't looked for it in the UK, and it's hundreds of pounds. So shop around, and if you're interested in it, it does contain many pictures of the mules on the wall of the Grand Palace. But the reason I say this is I was just unaware that that Indian epic had flowed outside of India, and there are versions of it all over the place, from made notes here, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Laos. There are different versions of it, and even within India, the Bengalis, the Tamils, and the Awadis have their own versions of it. And what's happened is this story has gone into Thailand, but where we see landscape and society change stories, often influence them. What has happened here is it isn't that the story's been sort of borrowed and then evolved. It's like it's literally been taken and replaced, almost, rather than evolved, with things that are associated with the religion, so Buddhism, and the views and the I guess the ways of life that the people of Thailand had at that time. And it's fascinating to see this. So I would like to probably do some further investigation on that, and create a video at some point in the future to discuss these Indian epics, because the other Indian epic, the Mahabharata, is the story that is in some respects has similarities with Homer's Odyssey and the Iliad. So it's interesting to understand if there's anything in the Mahabharata, in the Ramayana, that has that as well. So yeah, that's a side thing, but I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. I hadn't seen this, but it was just absolutely beautiful. So I don't know if anyone here is from Asia or has ever been to Bangkok and seen it, but yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. So let me go back to the questions, because I see texts shooting up. All right, so right, there's talk of right, I see someone talking about Gadriel. Is that? Oh no. So no questions. Right. So if you've got questions, by the way, put question at the start of the comment, and then I can see it's a question. So Right, so the other thing that's going on, what's going on about someone talking about Indo-European? I was told never to use the term Proto-Indo-European. Right there, here we go. Because it is Victorian era race-based, highly problematic, hotly debated hypothesis, not a language. Right. Proto-Indo-European is the name we give to a hypothesized language. And we're very comfortable to give it that name because whilst it's a probabilistic thing, it is probably the most, well, yes, it's the answer to why linguistics and cultural similarities across this Indo-European landscape is the best answer for that. So I feel it's fine to use to use that term. So what we also have to bear in mind, though, is that language is not genetic. Okay, language you tend to associate with certain cultures, and in more modern times you associate it with countries, but language is not genetic. So you will find people that are part of what we call the Yamnaya culture would speak Indo-European or Proto-Indo-European language, but you will also find there are probably people in the Yamnaya culture who spoke a different language, and you'll probably find there are people outside the Yamnaya culture who spoke Proto-Indo-European. So because this language didn't come out of nowhere, it came because different groups came together. So there's a Proto-Indo-European language, probably somewhere, possibly from the Volga, which is where we think the origin, or certainly a chunk of the people who ended up being sort of the ancestors of the Yamnaya culture came from. But it's fine to do that. But yes, you can't verify. It is hypothetical, but it is the most probabilistic answer considering the data we have. Right. So another question, Naga. Are you familiar with Jonathan Pageau's symbolic worldview of universal history in contrast to the more historical and cultural-orientated myth-theme methods we usually use? I am aware of Jonathan's work. Not too much of it, because it irks me a bit. Yes, so I mean, he is very much of how can I phrase this politely? Religion plays a big part in Jonathan's life, and it influences the work he does, and therefore what he's looking to achieve isn't necessarily purely academic, is how I'd phrase his work. I mean, I would love a talk, a chat with him one day, to talk about a myth or folktale that he's discussed. I know he's rewritten sort of Little Red Riding Hood and maybe even Cinderella. He was talking about it. It's interesting to see how stories are developed, and I think he helped influence Jordan Peterson, who was going on about how the Passion of Christ was probably the best hero's journey story there was. Which to me, if you think that the story of Jesus is the best story ever, then it's almost certainly made up to create such a great story. And I'd love to talk to Jordan Peterson about that, but I think he's very ill at the moment. He seems to have disappeared off the face of the planet. But I like having discussions with people like that about those things. And why they view stories in a particular way. So someone's asked, what are the Millie? Hello, Millie. What are the competing theories in place of Proto-Indo-European? Well, what I find, uh, because in terms of academia, I think generally people are very comfortable that there was a group, like the Yamnaya, that spread this language and the culture from it. But that is primarily because we see particular words in it that are used elsewhere, and some of those words are quite modern for the time. So in their ontological setting, they're modern, such as the word will. The word will we see across the Indo-European landscape. So it must have been spoken at a point, a source point for it to be spread everywhere. Or that's, I mean, there is a chance that isn't the case, but it's very probabilistic that it is the case. So most people think the Indo-European or the Proto-Indo-European thing is right. They're just arguments over exactly where and how those people got together. Now, the arguments that are very different to that tend to be nationalistic. So I often get people tell me how I'm wrong and that the Indo-Europeans came from India, or they could have come from Anatolia or Bulgaria, Albania, Romania, even Ireland, even Scandinavia. And indeed, if you read books, you see, I think it's in the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson. I think in the introduction he writes about how people in Europe came from Troy, and because there's a play on words of Noah's son who created the children of Europe. So we find that theological beliefs and nationalistic beliefs sometimes override what I would consider is more highly probabilistic academic hypotheses and theories. So I hope that makes sense. So it tends to be an emotion. I'd argue it tends to be, an emotional national thing. That kind of, you're being pushed for the wrong reasons. Right. Okay. So people still arguing that Indo-European wasn't a language. It is a hypothesized language. So there was probably a language that is an ancestor of the languages we consider that are in the Proto-Indo-European family group. There probably was an original source language. You can label it whatever you want. But, if the view is that, you may have the view that there wasn't a source language and it was just coincidence that all the different cultures across the landscape spoke very similarly. Without being mixed, which is odd because everybody moves all the time. We mustn't forget that 2,000 years ago, everybody was moving around. The view that people were static, and even though there's sedentary behavior and there's farming, multiple people moved and migrated. They would have taken language with them and stories with them, and things move. And so that really suggests language was taken with them. So I don't quite understand. Perhaps we're just not understanding why you don't think that's a language. But certainly, I'm quite happy that is right. Pi is Proto-Indo-European is a hypothesis. It's not a theory. It's a hypothesis because you can't prove it. All we can do is look at all the possibilities, and as I say, academically, it seems the most probable of the possibilities that could happen in terms of work and research. I know. Yes, so someone else here has said that some people think there's an Indian theory. Now, whilst I think there could have been some influence from a part of India. It would have been minimal considering other things we see, but there could have been that. What is interesting is farming, and that some of the early sedentary behaviour could well have come from India in the what we consider the Vedic region or Harappan sort of that northwest part of India. That has now been lost due to dams being built and the like. And so the archaeology is just not available for us to dig up to understand. But I believe some things were found that gave indications that sedentary behavior was happening, in India at the same time, or if not earlier than places like the Taztepla sites in Anatolia. I can't give you a reference because I can't even remember where I read that. But I can try and dig that up if people are interested. But that again is a hypothesis because we can't prove it. Right, there's another question from Jessica. Hello, Jessica. Have you spoken on any videos about what led you to the field of mythological studies? I'm curious. Thanks. Only on live streams when people ask me and I have interviews. I just found, I like stories. I find these ancient archaic poems of strange events and wonderful adventures fascinating. And then I found links between the Anglo-Saxon and the Old Norse. And just thought, oh, this is unusual. And it sort of went from there. But it's just a curiosity, really. And the more you like something and the more you find out about it, the more you tend to like it and the more you want to find out about it. And it snowballs to, that's all I do now is read and research mythology. So it's not necessarily a good thing to do, but yes, that's how I just reading stories that could have been old tradition 10,000 years ago just allows you to glimpse at a world that is lost. And that's magical. That's fascinating. It is probabilistic. Everything I do, I often say, is probabilistic. So we can't necessarily say the story we're reading is the story that was told 10,000 years ago. But even if it just contains certain words or lines or a plot that was being told, that's to be able to capture that when most people think these things are lost is fascinating. That's the driver for me. That's the thing I love, is just trying to discover this, trying to find the patterns, trying to understand how and why certain stories persisted, because that can tell you a lot about humans and humanity. Yes, Helen raises a really good point here. So wives were often chosen from outside the immediate area. Now, based on DNA, based on the research, we can see that, but we also see it in stories. So one of the most common stories there is, which is the bird wife, I think it's called, or motif, talks about how sort of men find women, have children, and then the women go back to their families after they've had the children. So there's a real interesting thing going on there on whether how long did families stay together for. It is fascinating, but I do have a video on that, and it does show that people did travel, people did know about other villages and other people far away from them to be able to get wives and to have children. So movement was just a de facto part of life. Now, short ways is a really good point. Why would anybody choose to live in the Arctic? Like reindeer and seal meat? Yes, I don't know. Why? Yeah, that's a really good point. Why? Why do people live in hot areas? Why? What is the right place to live? I live in Britain. Here, it literally rained all of January this year. Every day, rain, non-stop. But then I go to somewhere like Bangkok, and it's 37 degrees every day. It's ridiculously hot. No one likes that. Not even the people living there. They said it's too hot. So what is the right place to live? So there's got to be a balance. Perhaps it's people who love snowball fights. I don't know. Don't know. That is a good question. What drives people to live in extreme conditions when there are alternatives there? I'm sure someone's done some research on that. Yes, Noy said Thor was a hero from the Iliad and Odin. Certainly, the Greek story of Troy, I say, it was used a lot in around the early second millennium as a origin story from where things happened. So it's interesting. It's just a way of trying to apply Christianity onto a particular culture to sort of embed that, to remove maybe beliefs that weren't necessarily appropriate considering the new religions or coming along, or the new flavors of Christianity. It is interesting. So if you haven't read the Prose Edda, you don't necessarily have to read it all, but if you read the first few pages, like the introduction, because it sort of explains what the book is, it is a book on poetry. It's not a book on Old Norse mythology. It's just that the poetry was Old Norse mythology, but the introduction and you can see how the story changes. So the creation myth, we see one in the Volaspol, which is a poem in the Poetic Edda, where Ymir is sacrificed to create the world. But in the Prose Edda, we see Ymir sacrificed, but his blood then floods the world, and we see a flood very much like a Noah's flood, where only one of the frost giants survives, along with the other gods. It's fascinating. You can sort of see those influences. And, yes, Snorri was a Christian, and there would have been some Christian bias in the Prose Edda, but it wasn't a complete tool for conversion. But we do see stories in there, particularly the Trials of Thor, as being made up by Snorri to show that the pagan gods weren't as good as Christian or the Christian god. So yeah, fascinating stuff. What? John says, I've read a book that said King Arthur came from King Tut and Merlin from Imhotep. I would very much doubt King Arthur came from King Tut, because I'm not too sure the Britons knew about King Tut when we first read about Arthur. So yeah, I can't necessarily believe that. Someone asked, can you recommend a more up-to-date book on Pie origins than Anthony's The Will, the Horse and Language? Yeah, so my books are all over the place at the moment. I'm having a bit of a clear out, but we do see think of his name. West, I think it might be West, has a couple of books. He's got a new one out. It came out last year, which is a good update. Let me see if I can see it on my library. So, okay, I don't know if this will be interesting to anyone, but I'm trying to document my library So if you're interested in the sort of books I have, I've put a link down there. So yes, you can find the book. It is, oh yes, Malloy. I'll get that wrong. Malloy, JP Malloy, has Indo-Europeans Rediscovered, which came out in 2025. Very good book. I enjoyed that a lot. There's also a book by Olsen, Tracing Indo-Europeans, I quite enjoyed. Had some good maps in there, good diagrams. So they're probably two later ones than David Anthony's book. And West did the Indo-European Poetry and Myth, which is an excellent book as well. So that's what I would recommend there, David. Doodly do. Right. Just making sure there's no questions. Right. Okay. So, I ate moose once. It was nice. Yes, I've eaten moose. I like moose and bison and antelope and zebra and all sorts. Yes. Although I still prefer, I'm used to eating cow. But yes, it's not certainly if you're hungry and you need to eat. Eating a moose is fine. Catching a moose could be more challenging though, because they're quite big, aren't they? They're quite big things. So you have Lindsay believes why live in a hostile climate, skill set is the guess. They forgot how to, if you forget how to herd cows or look after sheep, but you can catch whales, then catching whales is the way to go, I guess. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think that is it. I mean, there was a bit of some research going on. I'm doing for some universities, but there's nothing significant. There's no papers out on those. So in terms of updates of where I am, because I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks, I wanted to catch up and say hello. So for anyone who's not a member of the Patreon or YouTube members site, I will release a video this week on a very brutal folktale. And then for members and the like, I may have a special guest live stream or recording next week. If not, I'll make a video on something over the next week or two, and I'll continue to progress the Mythology database with better quality data, which is going on. So I think that is where I am. Yes, I just want to say hello. It's great to see some familiar faces on here. It's always good to get your questions. Interesting chat about Proto-Indo-European language, or whether it was. I say I don't believe there's an issue suggesting that Proto-Indo-European was a language, but I say there will be some people who don't believe that, and that's fine. Yes, yeah, sure. The original brutal version of the teddy bear picnic, it is quite awful. Thank you for your kind words, D. Sam. And thanks, Helen, for turning up. Thanks, Sean and David and everybody, and Robin and Jessica, and there's many others. Exit. And yes, I will. I should be over my jet lag soon. I'm really tired, but hopefully in the next few days, as I say, I've got a friend staying. We'll do something, and I'll post something on the Patreon and the YouTube members for you all to watch or read. Hopefully this week something new. So with that, please stay safe and well, and I will talk to you all very soon. Have a lovely Sunday afternoon, evening, night, and a good week. Take care. Toodle pip.